Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go!
Welcome to Ballsy Uncut. Thanks for checking me out. I do appreciate the support, and to all my sponsors. Just getting the sponsorship renewals in, and people are on board again for a second year. We're coming up on the first anniversary. June 7th was the first show, so I do appreciate it. Obviously, I'd like to work it to the point where I can do this full time, but being truthful, it's not easy being a startup. And so I'm working on the lot at Crestview Chrysler. If you need a vehicle, new or pre-owned, new to you as I like to say, come check me out, 601 Albert Street. I'm there Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Monday's late till 8 o'clock right now into the spring and summer. And you can always get a hold of me, 306-526-7979. When I got hired there, I said, hey, I want to give ballsy deals. So give me some ballsy deals to give to the people. And so far with the clients that I've serviced, they've been happy with what they've received from yours truly, Michael Ball. So I thank them for that, and I thank you for supporting this podcast. If you want to get on board, I'd love to send you a package over, because hey, we can't grow the game of football we love without promoting it, and that's why I kind of started this podcast. Now I talk all sports. I'll be talking to Mike Kelly of the NHL Network coming up here on the show about the goings-on in the second round of the playoffs. Leafs in Florida off to a spirited start. Oilers getting started with Vegas. Winnipeg, how about that comeback against the St. Louis Blues? They'll play against the Dallas Stars. Hellebuck's, I think, finding his groove again, which could be dangerous for the rest of the league. And, of course, the Capitals and Canes, the other second-round series. Melfort Mustangs won the SJHL championship, so they'll try to wave the SJHL banner on the national stage. And, of course, the Medicine Hat Tigers against the Spokane Chiefs in the Western Hockey League. So let's talk about some things going on in the world of football. Ottawa Redblacks defensive back Tunde Adeleke is retired from the CFL. AJ Jakubik, voice of the Redblacks, the first to report that. Adeleke signed with the Redblacks as a free agent in February following a one-year stint with the Argos, during which he started 3 regular season games at strong side linebacker, had 15 D tackles, 1 special teams tackle, and won the Grey Cup with the Calgary Stampeders back in the day. And, of course, he won the Grey Cup with the Argos. A great football player, and he retires at the age of 29. Canadian defensive back Charlie Ringland, former U of S Husky, cut by the BC Lions, and he's expected to be a Canadian coming in now that Tunde Adeleke is done. So he'll go to camp with the Ottawa Redblacks. Teams making moves as we come up on rookie camp here on Wednesday. The Tiger Cats cut national linebacker Nick Cross of Dr. Martin Leboldas High School here in Regina. He was picked 9th overall, first round, 2021 CFL draft. He played in 29 games for the team, recording 38 special teams tackles and 2 defensive stops. The Rough Riders have chosen 2-time Grey Cup winning offensive lineman Chris Best and longtime assistant coach Alex Smith Jr. as 2025 Plaza of Honor inductees. I consider both guys my friend. In fact, Chris Best is going to be joining us this week on the podcast to talk about his induction into the Plaza of Honor. And of course, he was with me on the radio for a number of years pre- and post-game show before moving to BC to continue his engineering career. And also going in is Steve Molnar, who was inducted last year, or his induction was announced last year. The induction was deferred due to an illness in the family. Played for the Rough Riders from 69 to 78. He's most remembered for replacing George Reed, and he rushed for a career best 144 to help the Riders beat the Edmonton Eskimos in the 1976 West Final at Taylor Field. And I want to talk about this. Kind of a gospel according to Ballsy to wrap this part up. So I want to say I enjoyed my time with Adam Korczak, the Aussie punter who came into the Rough Riders and played for a couple of years. He is retired to take a job at Rutgers, and kudos to him. Wish nothing but the best for that young man, and he was great when he was with the Rough Riders. But here's the one thing I'd like Stuart Johnston, the commissioner, who I've asked to come on the show and Hasn't come on yet, so I'm not sure what the deal is there. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been asking for 2, 3, 4 times. Had Randy Ambrosi on a couple of times. Randy was always accommodating with me, so I'll give Randy that. But Randy Ambrosi wanted to expand the CFL into global markets. We want to be the global league. Hopefully getting hits on the website for social media, which I'm not sure they got that many hits. It never generated any revenue. And the NFL already owns global football. They've been in, or they're going to Spain, or they've been in Germany, they've been in England, they've been in Mexico. They're everywhere, okay? The NFL is a behemoth. It's one of the biggest companies in the entire world, has a GDP. It makes more money than the GDP of a handful of countries. Think about that for a minute. More than a handful. So you're not going to compete with the NFL. So I'm not sure what Randy was thinking there. In fact, when I had John Ryan on the show, both in radio and on his Kicking It with John Ryan segment, we talked about this a couple of times. It's kind of goofy that that they would go out. We said at the time, this is designed to go after Canadian kicking jobs, both kickers and punters, and got some pushback on that. But no, absolutely. It was an attack on Canadian kickers and punters for no reason. And the thing about Canadian kickers and punters is those are the guys that stay in the community and give back to the community. The Bob Camerons, the Louis Pasaglias, the Paulas Baldistons, the Mark McLaughlins. They give back to the community. Mark McLaughlin coached with the Rams here for a few years. Okay? Bob Cameron, big in the Winnipeg community. Louis Pasaglia in BC. John Ryan here in Regina as a prime example. John Ryan outfitted the Mini-Mites division in RMF. He outfitted them, held fundraisers, gave his own money, his own time. A $200,000 scholarship in honor of his dad to the Regina Rams. And he gets cut by the Riders so they can bring in a global punter. Now, that's not just a Rider problem. I'm not banging on the Riders. That's a league initiative. And coaches aren't stupid. If they're forced to do something, if you're forced to bring global mannequins onto your roster, and not all of them are mannequins, there's been a few guys that have excelled. I'll give them that. But the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So Adam Korzak's a great guy. And he's a young guy. And John Ryan was getting up there in age. But John Ryan was still kicking the hell out of the football when they let him go. They got rid of John Ryan, a pillar in the community, lots of friends and family in Regina who would, buy tickets. And he gave money back to the community. And the Riders got rid of him, dumped his carcass on the side of the road because it was a league initiative. So the league, I wonder why nobody goes to the games. I wonder why people aren't engaged. I wonder why we lost a generation of fans. Now, it'd be great if these global guys, and there are some great ones in the league, like Cody Grace, a great kicker. There's been a few others, okay? And I'm not against them at all. They're great players. But is it worth having a global draft and mandating guys on the team? Now, you'll say, they do it for Canadians. That's right, because it's the Canadian Football League. And I will never back down from that. Go to rugby around the world. Australia, by the way, where we get a lot of our kickers and punters from. Go to soccer. They do that. They're allowed a couple of imports and the rest are domestic players. So why is it so bad in the CFL? So I'm telling you, they created it was an attack on kickers, attack on punters and kickers in Canada. And Adam Korzak comes here for a couple of years, does well, takes a job at Rutgers, and kudos to him. This isn't against Adam Korzak. Like the kid, great player. John Ryan wasn't going to play forever, but you got to back the camera up. You're taking jobs away from David Soley, the former kicker of the Huskies. The list goes on and on and on. For what? You didn't get any money. Did you get a lot of hits on your website, which generated money? I don't think so. So what are we doing here? I hope the new commissioner, he's taking it, from what I can tell, haven't talked to him myself, he's taking a wait-and-see approach, and take it all in, which I agree with, and then he will put his stamp on the league. And I hope one of his stamps is get rid of this Global 2.0. Because check this out, okay? Like I said, screwing over Canadian kickers who were staples in the community, longtime players that stayed in one city, where a lot of these global kickers come to Canada to use the CFL. And listen, they're global kickers, but they're it's not like they're truly coming from Australia or New Zealand, or they've played at Rutgers, or they've played in the United States. They're like when some of these guys are Canadian because their mom was born here, they're fake Canadians. So same type of thing. I get that argument. I can buy that argument. But anyway, these guys come to Canada. So we get rid of the John Ryans and those kind of guys. These guys come to Canada. They use the CFL as a stepping stone for the NFL. They don't make it to the NFL, and they're gone. So now you've lost the pillars of the community. You're cutting Canadians out of your league, the David Solis and, Reese Huber, Regina kid who went to BCFC and aspires to be the next John Ryan. He may never get a chance because, and it was great to see, I think Eric Maximic, the Thunder kicker, was brought to camp, I believe, by the Tiger Cats. Anyway, it's great to see those guys get a chance, but do they really get a chance if we've got to pluck and place these global kickers on our roster with a mandated salary? I'm not buying it. And check this out. You don't think it was an attack on Canadian kickers? The CFL had their global draft right before the CFL Canadian College draft. And there were 2 rounds. 11 kickers/punters were chosen in 2 rounds of the global draft. 11. How many Canadian kickers and punters were chosen in 8 rounds of the CFL draft? How many? That's right, 0. So 11 in the global draft, 0 in the CFL Canadian College draft. Zippo, zilch. So you don't tell me that wasn't an attack on Canadian kickers and punters? Come on. And yeah. Coaches are smart. If they're made to do something, if coaches are made to do something, that's what they're going to do. And the majority of coaches and GMs, they won't tell you this, but they think it's stupid. They think it's ridiculous, too, that they have to put global guys on the roster. Not that they don't think some global guys are good, because they are good. That's not what I'm saying. But to be mandated to have a global draft and have to put guys on the roster? Nah, you're not, because you want to be the global league. The NFL's already got that wrapped up. How about we worry about expanding, get a 10th team in Canada if that's what we're going to do? Or like I said, go to the... Well, first of all, as the commissioner said, and he's right, let's lock down the 9 teams, make sure we got them healthy, make sure we got all our ducks in a row. Let's go to a 10th team. Let's expand to Northern United States. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. Like I said, I'd love to talk to him about this stuff, chop it up with him. Still waiting for the CFL to get back to me on that. Coming up, where are they now? This is a segment you could sponsor. We take a trip down memory lane, not just with football guys, but with people in all our favorite sports that help build the leagues and the games we love. Players, coaches, builders, you name it. Up next, Dan Comiskey, former Grey Cup winning lineman with the Edmonton then Eskimos, played with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I believe Hamilton and Calgary as well. He's a public speaker now, does his own podcast. We'll talk to Kami and also Mike Kelly of the NHL Network. This is Ballsy Uncut. Thanks for checking us out. Mike Kelly from the NHL Network joins us. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome, buddy. All right, Leafs over the Florida Panthers. I think they were both on our we can't trust them list, but the Toronto I'm not going to lie to you. Before the playoffs started, I picked Leafs, Oilers, Stanley Cup, Oilers winning in 6, so it's still alive for me.
That would make a lot of fans in Canada happy. My goodness, finally you'd get your Stanley Cup first since '93, but yeah, look, possible for sure. Toronto is playing as well as I've seen them play in the playoffs since 2016 when this young core was in place, and they've been there every year and obviously not had success. So the win against Ottawa, I think in a way, the fact that there was some adversity there was a good thing for them. Had they gone and just swept the series and sat around, maybe you go through some of these things later when it can be more costly against more experienced teams. So that wasn't a bad thing, I don't think. And then you look at the game against Florida, I thought they played so well, like literally from the opening faceoff, get the puck, chip it in, win a battle, get possession. They did that a couple times. They score 30 seconds in doing that. They, in the first 7-8 minutes of the game, did that a bunch. And that's what Florida does so well to other teams, right? But this is what Toronto has kind of adopted, especially under Craig Berube, and really taken a page out of the Panthers' book, a book that has won that team a Stanley Cup and got them to 2 finals. So, they're kind of weaning themselves off the I don't trust you team list anymore. Where, as you know, the Winnipeg Jets and LA Kings were firmly implanted, and then I trusted them this year. And man, Winnipeg, they pulled one out. Good for them. But yeah, this Leafs team, I can see them, if they can get past Florida, there's no reason they can't get to the Cup final.
And I give it, we kind of touched on this the last time you were on. It's the Berube factor. I think, sometimes coaches get too much credit and sometimes they get too much blame. It seems like head coaches in hockey anyway, they're discarded pretty quickly. But Craig Berube, he brings a little bit of a cachet behind the bench. Been there, done that.
Yeah, he does. As a guy who won a Stanley Cup playing a certain way with St. Louis, they were big on, get it in, work the puck low to high, traffic in front of the net. Maple Leafs obviously have players that have an abundance of skill, and you don't want to take the skill out of their hands, right? Nylander and Marner and Matthews, etc. At the same time, you gotta not cheat. And when I've heard other teams say this about Toronto in the playoffs this year, what's different? Well, the word I've heard used a couple times is they look more mature, a more mature team, which is just code for they're not shooting themselves in the foot as often. They're not trying to make plays when plays aren't there to be made. And that's one of the things Paul Maurice said when he took over in his introductory press conference with Florida, was that so often skilled players, it's the plays they don't make that are important. When they know that, this play isn't here right now, I'm gonna make the better play. And I think Toronto in years past was too guilty of trying to make a skill play when it wasn't there and it biting them. You're not seeing that nearly as much this year.
Mm-hmm. Sam Bennett does not get any disciplinary, consequence for an elbow to the back of the head of Stolarz. Just your thoughts on that whole thing that went down with Anthony Stolarz.
Yeah, well, number one, you hope he's doing all right. It's kind of scary to hear he left on a stretcher and to the hospital. He was at the facility, it sounds like, this morning, so that's good news. The play itself, like for me, if it was called a 2-minute penalty, I don't know that we're really talking about this as much. Mm-hmm. If it's not Sam Bennett, I don't know that we're talking about this at all. I don't think it was a play that warranted a suspension at all. It's a guy who's driving to the net. Now, the thing with Sam Bennett, maybe he's lost the benefit of the doubt on these accidental plays because of what he did, with Matthew Nyes in an earlier playoffs and knocking him out, what that kind of little rabbit punch to Brad Marchand. But I really, looking at it a bunch of times, don't see that here at all. I think it was a guy who was going to the net, made contact with a goalie. You see that happen, that play a lot, oftentimes. And the other thing that you can't discount, it's impossible to say that play alone is why Stolarz left the game. We saw him get hit in the mask with a very hard shot. You and I aren't doctors. We don't know. No. And we have no inside information on that. So the play itself, to me, no, I don't think in any way it's a suspendable play.
So, talk about a guy that's kind of transformed himself. I just went through with my own son through the CFL combine process as a dad, where you're running your 40 and doing all this stuff. Sam Bennett, if I'm not mistaken.
You run the 40?
I didn't run the 40. He did. What I'm saying is I went through it as a parent. No, I used to run the 40 back in the day. What I'm getting at is sometimes we put too much stock into these testing things. Wasn't Bennett the kid that couldn't do a pull-up? And now he's one of the tougher, like he's a gritty hockey player. Talk about I don't know, a misconception, a bad perception. Anyway, it's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, well, he's evolved his game for sure. He didn't at the start of his career. He didn't play with quite this much of an edge. He's been through the playoffs. He knows what it takes to win, and he's not afraid to do what he thinks he needs to do to help his team win. It's Sam Bennett. Every fan base should want him on their team for the playoffs. Every team would want him on their team for the playoffs. And does he cross the line at times? Of course, he has. It hasn't always been called either. But this is a play that, again, I think is there wasn't really much to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunate result, but not much to the play.
Hey, the Winnipeg Jets were on our don't trust them list, and they come up with an epic third period and then into overtime. Are you buying Jet stock? Are you still like, okay, that's great, you won a series? Like, where are you at after that, Mike? Can they get on a bit of a run here? I know they're hurt. Dallas is a bit banged up, so this will be an interesting series.
Yeah, well, Winnipeg, in some key areas outplayed the Blues if you just take the goaltending out of the equation. So it's not like they lucked their way to a series win. It required a borderline miraculous comeback in Game 7 to get a series win. So it's not like fundamentally they're a flawed team in how they played or they were vastly outplayed by the Blues. Now, that being said, when the other team takes a shot on Connor Hellebuck, like, I kind of hold my breath for a second, and it could be a wrist shot from the top of the circles. That's not a good feeling to have. And if I'm having that feeling, there's people that are playing the game that I'm sure are having that feeling at times. Hellebuck was really good in overtime, obviously perfect, didn't let anything in, but we don't know what to expect. He could come out and be lights out in Game 1, and that would be not that surprising. He could come out and let in 5 goals, and we've seen that story before. So when you have that big of a question mark at the most important position for a guy who's going to win the Vezina Trophy this year, it's a massive variable. Ottinger played really well for Dallas. Was like everybody talks about, Mikko Rantanen as they should. What he did in the last 3 games, they don't win that series if Jake Ottinger doesn't play as well as he did, because Colorado really took it to them for a good chunk of that series. So, what's the status of Mark Scheifele? Right? If Scheifele's back for Game 1 and he's healthy, is Miro Heiskanen playing? There are a lot. Like, we ran our model, and our model said a slight advantage to Winnipeg. But if Scheifele comes back and Heiskanen doesn't, or vice versa, I mean, it throws this thing right up into the air.
So Mark Messier made that big prediction against the Devils, and then came out and did it, and he was bold there. But I don't remember, like, that was what a epic performance by Mikko Rantanen. Does it in a quiet way, and really that's rubbing salt into the wounds against your old team. What a performance in that game.
Oh my goodness. It was incredible to do what he did given the circumstances, which are entirely unique. To do what he did, I don't know that I've seen anything more impressive in a Game 7 in hockey that I can remember. Again, just given the circumstances of being down a couple of goals, kind of almost midway through the third period. And then you go and put up 4 points in a period for the second time in as many games. It's outrageous. So yeah, hats off to him. That feels good for him. Like, there's been a lot made about the exit in Colorado, how things went in Carolina, him going to Dallas, etc. As far as I can tell from the people I've talked to, like, he did not see a trade coming, and there was room to find a deal. So he was, for him, I think you can kind of liken it to someone breaking up with you when you're not seeing that coming and saying, whoa, I thought things were good here. What just happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
of course you want to, bring a smoke show to the dance the next time you see that person. So it was a redemption game for him for sure. And my goodness, he was, again, you go back to Carolina and people saying, oh, it didn't work out so well there. Is he a star without Nathan McKinnon? Like, just watch the guy play. He's a superstar.
Yeah, he's a stud for sure. Okay, your model that you guys ran had Vegas beating Edmonton. I feel, though, like the Oilers are getting better. Now, there's the wild card in net. I absolutely get it. But when you have the 2 best players in the playoffs on one team, at least that's my opinion. I know I'm a bit biased, but when you have the 2 best guys, I like the Oilers in 6 in this series, and they owe Vegas one.
They do. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Like of the 4 playoff series, there wasn't one that our model projected 60% or better. So there's not one series where we're saying, 6 times out of 10 or more, that teams should win based on what we believe. So of course Edmonton can win the series. Goaltending is a wild card. Like Pickard was good. And I've said it forever. Edmonton doesn't need a great goalie. They need a good goalie who can stop what he should stop, because they'll score 3-4 goals in a game and can win that way. Skinner hasn't delivered that in the playoffs, but Pickard was fine. So Evander Kane, I think, is a great point that you bring up. Like, he injected a lot of life into that lineup, stepped in into a playoff series, and was a force. And that's huge. And it allows you to not have to, again, lean so heavily on the 2 guys that you know are probably going to get you 2 points a game, and you're still wondering, can you win? But, depth showed up for Edmonton in that series in the first round. And it still blows me away that the Kings shortened their bench as much as they did. I thought that depth would give them an advantage. Completely took it away from themselves. But, yeah, Vegas is a tough team. Like, Aiden Hill to me is not, I know he's won a cup, and boy, did he play well in that playoffs. I take nothing away from him, but he's not a guy I look at and say, wow, that's going to be an X factor. I don't think. So, yeah, Edmonton, they could get it done.
And who do you like in Carolina Caps?
Well, look, I like Washington, and our model gave them slight favorite status, which apparently is the only model to do so. I think one of the reasons for that is that, a lot of public models will weigh shot volume probably more than ours does, and Carolina, they are the shot volume team. So, look, I just see my thing with Carolina has always been this: is that they play a aggressive forecheck, just checking overall game that will give you success more often than not. The farther you go into the playoffs, you start to meet teams that can match that, but then also have star players that Carolina doesn't. Aho's a great player. Svechnikov can be a game breaker, and he showed that in the first round. Can he do it for 6-7 games? We haven't seen it consistently. Well, now you got Strome, who's playing fantastic. You got Ovechkin, who does his thing. You've got Tom Wilson. A sneaky guy that I think could maybe be the guy we're talking about at the end of this series is Connor McMichael. So the Caps, to me, they're big, they're heavy, they're skilled. I didn't even mention Dubois or Carlson or Chychrun or other guys, but
yeah,
I just think they're going to be too big. I think they can play Carolina's game, and they'll just be a little more skilled and a little bigger and heavier doing it.
I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I got 3 of the 4 teams being Canadian. I got Winnipeg, Edmonton, Toronto, and Washington. That's my final 4.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Look, I think you can make a case for any of the 8 teams to win their series. Really, like it's not outlandish to say that. In the first round, there were certain matchups where I was just like, I don't see this happening at all. Possibly, I don't get that vibe in the second round at all. So that makes for good hockey, right? And that's one of the great things about our sport. It's not like some other sports where one team can play another team 100 times and they might win twice. So it should be a great round. Yeah, well, I didn't even mention with Carolina and Washington is the goaltending either. Like Freddie Anderson looks like he's good to go, but can he finish a series and be healthy?
Yeah, no
Probably
kidding.
Probably not. You hope he can. Yeah, because he's really good when he's in the net. But Logan Thompson was great in the first round, and expect him to be great again.
Lastly, I feel like the NHL's on the cusp of kind of being like, it may never be, but I think it's starting to take over the NBA. Like, I think it's in popularity, and baseball it's for traditionalists, but I feel like the NHL's making some inroads here. Or am I wrong? In America is what I mean.
I hope so. I think you're right. And again, you'd probably want to look at TV ratings. You'd want to look at attendance numbers. I think attendance was pretty strong this year.
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I think it's great that ESPN is televising games nationally, that Turner's doing the great job that they're doing. And like the Four Nations, the whole sports world was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it. That became mainstream. And that helps. In the first round of the playoffs, maybe the craziest. The first round's always crazy. It was maybe the craziest in the last decade. And people are talking about it. So, look, you and me are biased. We see hockey for the great sport it is. And it probably shocks us both that it's not massive in the U.S. or everywhere else. But I hope so. In basketball, I mean, they're kind of, people don't love their All-Star game. People don't love their playoffs from the outside looking in, it seems. So there was once upon a time, Ballsy, you remember this. Once upon a time, these two sports were kind of even.
Yeah, it was right around 93. Right around 93 when Bettman came in, and then it kind of went the other way. But I will tell you this, man, it is kind of weird that Americans aren't into this more. It's got speed, it's got toughness, it's got fighting on ice. Like, you would think that would be right down Americans' alley.
I agree. The one theory that I have is I think Americans tend to like sports that Americans win and are kind of dominant in.
Yeah.
You look at baseball, the NFL, basketball,
Track.
So hockey, it's trending in the right direction, though, because the U.S. team, you could argue, is now kind of on par with Canada. And American players are some of the biggest stars in the league, and that's only becoming more and more. So if it gets to a point where, U.S. rips off a gold medal or two, American player becomes the best player in the league, whatever, I think it only helps it. And the bigger the sport is in the U.S., the better it is for everybody who watches hockey, loves hockey, is involved in hockey. So I hope so.
Mike, thanks for this, man. I appreciate it.
You got it. I actually want to rescind one thing I just said. I don't want the USA to win any gold medals in hockey. But if anyone has to do it at some point for the argument I just made, I guess one.
Hey, you did it because it's good for the game. It would be good for the game of hockey. Canadians are always going to like it, but it's to grow the game of hockey. If we had to turn it over once or twice, maybe, even though it's like sour milk in our mouth, we would. Hey, Mike, thanks for your time, man.
Anytime, pal.
Dan Comiskey joining us. How are you, bud?
Michael, thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, I love talking to you. So it's an interesting story because you were telling me before we started to roll here, your dad is from Ontario, but you were raised on the prairies. Can you just elaborate a little bit for me?
Yeah, so Comiskey's a funny name. All right, let's just get started there. All right,
Yeah.
so Comiskey's actually an Irish name, and everybody thinks we're Ukrainian, which is okay, because I like Ukrainians too.
Yeah.
Polacks, doesn't matter to me. We're all the same.
Yeah.
But so if there was 5 brothers that came over, 3 went to the States. Of the 3 that went to the States, one of them's son was Charlie Comiskey, who was the first man ever to lead off first base, and he ended up owning a ballpark.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that ballpark.
I never got in for free, but I still brag about it. So the 2 that came to Canada, they went to Ingersoll, and my grandfather moved to Chatham, Ontario. Ingersoll's about an hour down the road here from us. So that's where, like, my dad had 10 brothers and sisters. My mom had 6, and they're both from this area. And then when we were kids, we just did a lot of traveling around. My dad was a teacher, and I think they were looking for work in the 70s back in 1970, all those years ago.
Yeah.
And we ended up in Saskatchewan, and that's where I was raised, and then came back here, and then my dad moved back here finally in, I think, 89. Mm-hmm. And so when he was getting a little bit older, I moved back home. I was all over Canada for a long time, but moved back home, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah. Okay. So you get drafted by the Riders in 1997. Did you now help me out here? I'm trying to remember. I just started covering the team then as an intern. Did you play on the Grey Cup team that year when you guys went on a miraculous run? But even the 49ers with Montana would have had a tough time beating Doug Flutie and the Argos.
Listen, man, it was not fair, really, if you think about it. My first year, I don't start till week 14. They put me in. We get on a winning streak. Maybe it was week 12. I can't. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But then, we got Argos. We got Doug Flutie and the Argos, and we make it all the way to the playoffs. We make it all the way to the Grey Cup in Edmonton, and then we lose that game.
Yeah.
And then I see my next Grey Cup is actually in Saskatchewan with Edmonton in my old locker room. So there's actually a lot of full circle moments in the CFL,
yeah,
right?
for sure. So, but let's start with 97. Like, you're a pro athlete, you want to win, but listen, you're a human being too. Are you like, we're going to have to play our absolute best game and they're going to have an off game for us to win this game? Like, is that kind of in the back of your mind or never in the back of your mind?
Listen, Ballsy, I was so naive. I just thought, listen, we got Reggie Slack, and he was a stud. Like he's repping 2 1/4 for 30 and he's our quarterback, right? Like I'm keeping up going 30 with him, right?
Yeah.
I felt like we had a great team. We had great leaders. We had who we have in the locker room. We had Scott Hendrickson. We had Bobby Jurison. We had to me, and it was my first pro team. I thought we had a shot, and I think honestly, you have a shot if you got a heartbeat, but probably someone had to take poor Doug out, and that wasn't going to happen. He's too hard to hit.
So 2003. So you've won 2 Grey Cups, 2003, 2005. It's like kind of like saying which kid you like better. I've got 2 kids. I like them both. I love them both. My son, my daughter. So maybe it's hard to pick which one's better. But to me, you just kind of gave us a little appetizer there. I would think 2003 hits a little closer to home, does it not?
Well, 2003 was more fun. I wasn't married, no kids, man. It was like the only thing I cared about, right? Like it was like you put that brass ring up there and it's all you want.
Yeah.
By the time 2005 rolled around, married, twin daughters, both infants, a lot of different circumstances going on, and your mind is reeling, and you're just you got to get home that night, and so I mean, just different teams. Old team. 2005 was an old team. It's funny, you get old real quick, right? They called our offensive line, we were better than average in 2003. And I loved it. I've loved most offensive lines I've been on. I love my boys, right?
Yeah.
But like Saskatchewan's hard to compete with Saskatchewan's offensive line, having Andrew Grain, having, Jeremy O'Day, Gene Bukowski, John Terry, like just studs, right? All the way around. Then I go to Edmonton and I've got Chris Morris, who's now the president. Yeah. I've got Bruce Beaton, who stands at like 9'16" or something, right? He was standing. So I felt like somebody's little brother all the time, right? Everybody's bigger than me. But we got old fast, like it happens, right? So in 2005, we were sold. We were bringing our chiropractor on the road, not lying, for the playoffs.
Yeah.
His name was Don Bradley. We brought him on the road, and he kept us going with tape and string, right? And I mean, you play a game, you win it, you love it. It's good memories. Good memories for sure.
Yeah, and speak of that memory of 2003, actually sitting in your old locker for the Grey Cup, but not playing for the Rough Riders.
It was a little. So I had a thing with Roy Shivers, right? Because he traded me away.
Yeah.
And there was some other stuff there too. I didn't feel real respected. And when I got to Edmonton, I was dealing with Hugh Campbell, who was like everybody's godfather, right? Like he was a pretty solid dude. But it's funny because when you're young, you think that everybody's betrayed you when you get traded. It's weird, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the team betrayed me. And now I look back and like some of my dear friends are still guys that are in that town, right? Like Jeremy O'Day, I could call that guy for lunch anytime, and he'd be there and it'd be a great time, right? It's just really funny, man. Danny Barrett as a head coach, in Saskatchewan he was the guy that turned that team around. Do you want to hear a great story? I don't know how much time we have.
Oh, I got time, yeah.
So back in the day, in the 90s, when I first started playing for the Riders, we used to sing a song when we'd win. Okay. And this is before Danny Barrett. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the song was kind of raunchy. It was like, we're the raunchy Riders, raunchy are we. And then there's a whole bunch of swear words, which I don't use anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's rude. Right.
Okay.
But it was just kind of a, I don't know, like a gutsy, kind of dirty things, a bunch of guys to sing. Danny Barrett heard that song one time, and first time he won a game because he's a new head coach. We're like 5 games in, we win, we break the losing streak. We got him in the locker room. He's got the playbook rolled up in his hand, and he's going to talk to us. And that song comes out, and the playbook drops to his hips, and his head goes down, and he says, "Okay, I'm glad I heard that song. Now we never have to hear that song again because that's not who I am. And that's not who my team is. And if that's who you are, then I'm going to get rid of you."
Wow.
And it was it. And then he kicked the media out of the locker room that was making fun of us, and he started changing our traditions, and the team started respecting itself, right? Yeah. I really credit like there's a lot of guys that have done work, man. But like for me, my moment with that team was one of the huge lessons that he taught, is that sometimes you got to change traditions, right?
So you used to be a swearer. You just said that. You used to swear. Maybe not a lot, but you swore. What made you change your and to tie in, is that a cross over your shoulder, or what is that? Like, what is that? Like, I'm a Christian man myself. I've been fixated on that thing over your left shoulder since I've been having you on here. So were you always a spiritual man, or was there a flip in your life or anything like that?
Thank you so much for asking. Big flip in my life. So I was brought up Irish Catholic, and I kind of understood what the whole thing was about, but I didn't understand. I didn't know Jesus. I didn't take the time to get to know him. I don't blame the church. I don't blame anybody in particular except myself. And I had to go on a long road of a lot of different avenues and a bunch of bad mistakes and nothing. I didn't kill anybody, but like a bunch of bad mistakes. And I found the Lord about 3 years ago, and since then I've really tried to beat the swearing thing. But He's fixed a lot of my problems in terms of things I used to be weak for, right? And it's something about being saved. Yeah. A good friend of mine, he says, people get mad when you say you're saved. He says, but what was your life like before, and what's it like now? Well, before I wasn't saved, and now, things are good, right? So so I'm saved. I try not to swear. I'm not the best. I break down once in a while, but I do my best.
So I actually was going to be a priest, but I was dating. I'm divorced, but I was dating my then wife, and I went to St. Peter's, the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, and I'm down kneeling next to where St. Peter's tomb is, and I just say in my prayer, said, listen, I've thought about being a priest, but priests can't be married, so I guess God, I've got a girlfriend now, and I like girls too much, so that's just the way that it is. Hope you forgive me. I walked out into the courtyard there, and a pigeon crapped on my shoulder, like literally 2 steps out.
Didn't turn around, did you?
Oh, no, but here's where I'm going with this. I've kind of always had religion in my back pocket, and I'm not saying that like I'm bragging. Like I've had it there, and shame on me. I've kind of never gotten away from it, but kind of got lazy a little bit. Okay, you talked about finding God. Like, what made? I always joke when people say that. Don't take this the wrong way, Commie. But when people say that, I'll say, well, He was always there. Like, He's always there. You found Him, but He was never lost. You were lost. So what made you find Him? Like, what was there an instant? Was there a moment? Was there something that happened in your life where you're like, boom, I'm getting on board Team God now, and I'm locked in now?
It's a great question. I'm the same, right? Like, I knew the story. I knew there was a God. I couldn't commit to Jesus. I couldn't commit to the Bible. But I knew it was something. Yeah. And I think I was just tired of trusting myself and screwing it up. Mm-hmm. And so I started. There was Jordan Peterson came out, and he wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life. Yeah. And I read that book, and I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. All of it just made a lot of sense. And I found out that he studied the Bible. So I started watching his stuff on the Bible. Yeah. And then one day it was like, I started listening to a pastor online, and he said, you got to find a church. And so I went to a church. I started going to churches in my hometown. And then honestly, Ballsy, they did an altar call. And I don't know, people maybe don't know what an altar call is, but if you're in a Protestant church or Pentecostal church or sometimes non-denominational, they say if anybody wants to come up and dedicate their life to Jesus right now, you can do it. Just come on up. And I put my head down and I just said, listen, like, if you're real, put me up there. And somebody came and grabbed my hand and walked me up there. And I'm like saying the words, like, God, I confess Jesus, you're my Savior. I confess you're God. And I literally, as I'm saying them, I'm like, do I mean this? And then the next day, like, if you talk to my wife, who was there from before and after, and I've known her for 30 years, I'm remarried, but we've been friends for that long. Yeah. She says, just like I do, the next day I woke up and my life was totally different. Wow. I was just at peace, and I understood that I just submitted and surrendered to His rule and His law, and not because I have to, but because, gosh, He died for me, and He saved my soul. And I mean, for me not to is like, doesn't make any sense, right? He's my king.
Yeah. Dan, Dan, when we talk about football, do you regret playing football? Is there any regrets with injuries or anything like that as you look back on your career?
No, not at all. No regrets with injuries. I probably could have quit a few years before I did, but like you live your path, right? You do what you do. had some concussions later on. I maybe later on in my life I might regret, but so far I've been very lucky with health. I've stayed in shape and survived, so that's good. The one thing that happened to me after football that I wanted to start thinking about right away was just how fast the lights go out and when guys are looking for careers and what they should be doing. And so I've had a few conversations about this through the years. And it's like you play long enough and you lose those years where you're just grinding it out between like 25 and 35 as a young man in a career. Right. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden you got to do those between 35 and 45. And now it just changes the whole dynamic of your kids. Right. Of, your key relationship with the kids, their whole thing. And I think that, I just saw a lot of guys struggle, and then now I see a lot more guys struggle. So we're, I've partnered with a guy locally and part of my career is, as you know, keynote speaking, right? So I talk about safety, leadership, team building, all that kind of stuff. It's really about accountability and it's about, it's really that teamwork piece, right? But what we're doing is something called Breakfast with Champions, and we're doing a cross-country tour and working to start in Regina and then go to Edmonton and Calgary and then hit everybody out west and then come back traveling east. And we want to get a keynote speaker other than myself, somebody, big name, and we're going to bring people out for a breakfast that are going to work later that day, and we're going to get sponsorships. We're going to raise a bunch of money for men's mental health, and we're going to have actual resources that we can give to people that are going back to work for their workers. So whether it's resources about suicide helplines, whether it's resources about mental health, whether it's actually coaching, whatever it is, we're going to have a big bag of resources. So it's something we started working on a couple months ago, and we're getting pretty excited about.
Were you you were a good interview? I remember that, but I don't remember you being as charismatic as you are now. Like, have you grown into this outgoing, or were you always outgoing? Like, listen, you're better than most guys that I interviewed before, but there's a little more polish to you. I guess it comes with anything. When you first go to training camp, you're not as good as you are in your 6th year as an offensive lineman. But have you always been like this?
I don't know. That's a hard question to answer, man. I would say thank you, number one, for saying that. I think I had a real suspicion for the media back when I was a player, and I got caught a few times saying the wrong thing, and so I was very careful. And I also maybe you recognize this too, being a guy who's been saved later in life, right? Like, yeah, I know who God was. Yeah, but when you actually stop having things to hide, life gets pretty easy.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, really good point. Yeah, easier to put a smile on your face for sure. I'm going to ask you about the Edmonton Elks. The Eskimos are what I remember. Like when you used to go into Edmonton as the Eskimos, if you happen to win a football game there, you were lucky. And like what you guys did in 1997, going in there, the option with Reggie Slack, you won. You took over their locker room in 1997. But this team has fallen on some hard times, and now your old teammate takes over. I had him on the podcast my last or 2 installments ago, Chris Morris, good guy.
Great guy.
How do you feel about him taking over, Mark Killam, Golden Bear, and just maybe, a change? Because the league is better with a better Edmonton team. There's no doubt about it.
I agree, and I'm so hopeful, and I'm counting on him turning it around. Number one, first thing he did was hire Ed Hervey. Now listen. So now you got Chris Morris and Ed Hervey running the show. And when I was there, those guys were the heart of the team. They were the guys that understood about the tradition of the Eskimos and what it took to have championships. Ed Hervey was a guy that, as a receiver, he was a captain who did not allow any receiver to celebrate in the end zone. Just think about that.
No, I believe it. I believe it because he is a little gruff. He's a little rough around the edges. And as a guy who is like that, I can respect that.
Totally.
He just came out and said there are no stars in this league. And he didn't mean like there are no stars because everybody was jumping on him. But what he meant is he's never had that star mentality, even though he was a star himself.
Oh, yeah. One of the tougher guys. I one time watched him dislocate his finger, compound fracture, come back after halftime, and first play go for a wide out and get a touchdown. Legit, one of the tougher men I've ever met in my life. And Chris Morris is the same way.
Yeah.
I feel like those guys are great. Mark Killam, another guy I've been around. I know you know.
Yeah. Why? But wait. Just don't gloss over that, man. Why do you call him Murder? Why was he called Murder? Come on, you can tell.
Listen, I can tell because I played with him. So like the nicest guy you ever met. Like honestly, one-on-one, when you have a conversation with Chris, he's sincere. He's questions. He inquires about your life. He you know, as an old veteran player, he would build you. I remember him having conversations. He's a few years older than me, right? He'd build me up. But on the field, when the helmet was on, like he was an absolute killer. Like he was just mean. Like there's very few guys who were that mean.
Yeah.
And there's things I could say, but like his nickname, Swack, came around. Remember Swack?
Yeah.
So Swack came around and he just started calling him C Murder. And so we all started calling him C Murder, Chris Morris, C Murder. And then we started calling him that like in public, and he was a teacher. And so he'd go to school and his kids started calling him C Murder. So we had to lay off it because we might get C Murdered. I don't know why.
But just to wrap that portion of this conversation up, if anybody's going to turn it around, it's him. Like he's dedicated to the double E for sure.
Well, and he's been coaching in Edmonton since he retired. He's been he's a Golden Bear coach for how many years, and he knows the game and he knows the players, and he also. So when I look at going and coaching at a professional level, which I don't because it's 2 years out for me, too many years out for me, but I have a good friend locally. His name's Craig Poole, and he's one of the best football coaches in high school level in Canada. He's fantastic. When I talked to him about coaching now versus 20 years ago when he started, he says you would never be able to catch up. And Murder knows all those guys, and he knows exactly what happened and how to coach those guys as the young players that they are. So not only has he got the tradition of the Eskimos, which are now the Elk, but he's also got the knowledge of how to coach young players, which I just don't know how you beat that. Like I think he's going to be fantastic.
How do you feel about the Canadian football player and how he is really not glorified isn't the right word because you use that for your God, but where he isn't publicized as much as he should be. Like the combine isn't streamed. We don't have 5 rounds of the draft on TV. Like the CFL really misses the fact that they're not building the Dan Comiskys up. You know what I mean? Like we should know these guys' stories before they get to the Canadian Football League. It's called investing. I feel like the Canadian football athlete has always been the athlete in Canada that's kind of been pushed to the side. Yeah, well, he doesn't play in the NFL. Yeah, he's not a big time player. Like if these guys had one more zero on their check, perception would be different. As my grandpa told me, 2 things he told me: nothing good ever happens after midnight, and perception's everything, and facts are negotiable. And it's true.
That is true. It is true. And it's funny because I think the money actually at some level makes us more part of the Canadian game. Right. And it's not like these guys are starving, right? We all got paid enough to survive. And I'll tell you, my first season, 1997, we didn't make much money. I guarantee. Right after 96, in 96, the league just about went under, right? So you're talking not a lot of zeros. But I feel like that's part of the heritage of the game at some level. And you have to understand that it's more than just playing the game. It's about investing in your future, creating relationships with people, local business guys, becoming part of your city, becoming part of your team. Regina does a better job of that than anybody else. Calgary does a great job. Edmonton does a great job. But man, when you go to Regina, you're Rough Riders. They're invested in the community. They stay after. So why is a guy from LA staying in Regina? You know what I mean? Like even Detroit. Like why? Well, because that's that's where their future is. And I feel like there's part of that is part of the Canadian story, you know?
Yeah, for sure it is. So where can they find, so you got this breakfast, series of breakfasts coming across. What do you call it again?
It's Breakfast with Champions.
Okay. And so when does this start? How do people get more information, and how can they you got a podcast I see as well?
So I have a podcast. It's called the Bridge Podcast, and I'm just bridging people together, different areas, different expertise. But I'm going to have all this stuff up on my website. It's being revamped right now. You can get that at dancomtalks.com. DanComTalks, just like it sounds, .com. And I'll get you a link for that for the bottom. And then, it's part of Think Tank. And if you go Think Tank with a Y instead of an I, it's Think Tank, thinktank.ca. And it's myself and a fellow named Ian France, and he is an expert in events. And I'm going to just do the best I can to keep up with him. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to, hopefully make some changes, man. Hopefully help some people out.
Okay. Lastly, Kami, so I've, my head's a bowl of soup here this week, the last week, because my son got picked 54th overall by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Amazing.
And he's in training camp. He just pulled up to Matt as we talk. He just got to the dorm, and he goes, "Dad, this is big boy football now. I'm rooming with the guy that's bounced around the NFL 3 or 4 years from Georgia." And so he goes, "I had a 5-hour drive. This guy just drove up from Georgia. I literally just got off the phone with him." So I created this podcast here to talk about all sports, but to highlight the 3-down game. And
yes.
a lot of aspiring football players who want to be the next Dan Comiskey, Neil Hughes, whatever, watch this thing. So for guys just going into their first training camp, like my kid, what kind of advice do you have for them when they're probably wide-eyed, like, holy cow, I'm with a guy that's been in the NFL. I just told them, put on your helmet, go play football.
Absolutely. Great advice. I think number 2, I'm just like that. I was drafted 42nd overall, so drafted late.
Yeah.
And what that means is you feel like you're picked for fodder, but all you got to do is just make sure you stick it out. Just don't, there was days I wanted to quit. Guy named Roger Aldag, I remember him rubbing my head when I was just a rookie, just shaking the hair on my head after practice one day. He says, suck it up. I was getting yelled at, right? Suck it up. It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
You got to just stick it out, man. Stick it out. Get through the end of camp. Compete every day and just earn your spot. You don't necessarily have to even start first game, but just don't quit. Earn your spot because not everybody gets a chance. And it'll every bit of effort you give that game, it gives you back.
Were you like that? Like, were you wide-eyed when you came into your first training camp as a late pick? Like, what were your emotions like?
Well, I was, again, like I said, I was naive. I was a naive young man. I knew I could compete physically, and I knew I was behind the 8 ball in terms of my knowledge of the game. And so I just thought, I'm just gonna try to rough everybody up. And so when I got my hands on somebody, I would just try to be as destructive as I could be. Not like brutally. I'm not trying to pick fights or anything. That was never me. Yeah. But just always trying to play as physical as I could. So by the end of my first camp, they put me on the practice roster, and Jim Daly was my head coach, and he says, and my other thing was I knew that I had the potential to play, right? Because physically, I just measured up. I looked at the guys that were playing O-line beside me, and I was 310, and I was repping 2 1/4 for 30, and I was running a 540, and I was a good specimen, right? So I knew I could compete. So Daly asked me, he said, "What are you going to do if we set you free? What if we cut you?" I said, "Well, what's the closest team?" I said, "Winnipeg. I guess I'll go to Winnipeg." And then he says, "Well, what if that doesn't work?" I said, "Well, then I'll keep on kicking around. And I'll find a place." And my mind was just, I was going to play, right? So I knew I wanted to play. And he just said, "Well, we'll find a spot." So they put me on the practice roster. So I was on this practice roster for 14 weeks, making $500 a week. And I fell in love with the Rough Riders, right? Like I just loved, like it was just a great team, man. Like it was, the heart and soul of that team was just such a, I was a Regina boy too. We grew up I lived in Southie, man. I lived in Regina with my mom going to high school at Martin LeBolas High School. So for me, it was like I was in heaven, just, it was just, on top of all the guys, right?
Yeah.
I was certainly scared. Everybody's scared. Everybody thinks they're going to lose. Everybody thinks they can win, got to just finish the game every week, finish the game every practice, right?
Yeah. Okay, and I'll get one more in here.
Yeah.
Leadership. Are you born as a leader, or can you become a leader?
That's a great question. I don't think you're born as a leader. I think that it's a matter of experience, and I think you've got some natural skill sets, right? But really, there's like, if I go to what I teach, there's 25 fundamental habit characteristics of leaders. The first 15 are your individual characteristics, and that's the stuff that allows you to get to a position where you can lead, right? So the more you compete on those levels, right? And it's some of it's self-control, it's impulse control, it's intuiting the people around you and understanding what they need, and there's all these different characteristics, but all of them can be improved. Right. Yeah. So it's not like, there's some people that are fine. There's people that are pathological, right? There's Dexters out there. I never try to coach Dexters. Yeah. But in terms of like, who's out there, if you're out there and you've got a team around you of people, you can climb the ranks of the team based on those first 15 characteristics. And then the last 10, you can also improve so you can actually lead and make decisions. Not everybody's going to be making not everybody's going to be the president.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think you can grow them all. Absolutely.
Dan, this has been fun, man. Great to catch up with you. You're aging well, got a nice smile on your face. Be blessed, and let us know when you're rolling through town. I'll stop by for breakfast and get some words of wisdom from you.
I would love that, man. Thanks so much for having me, Ballsy. It's just been awesome catching up.